Well, welcome back to the Church Biz Podcast. My name is Josh Reeves, and I'm your host, and I'm here today with Jacob Musgrove. Jacob is a friend. We're both members at our church, and Jacob is a insurance broker with Orr and Associates. Jacob, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And why don't we begin by you just telling us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, Jacob Musgrove. I've lived in Austin area for 12 years now. Have my wife, Sarah, and we've got 3 kiddos, 10, 9, and 5. They're growing up quick, Charlotte, Wyatt, and Ellis. We've been a member at Redeemer Round Rock since 2015. I was thinking about this morning. So 9 years, almost 10, which is crazy. It's going by very quick. And a little bit of background as far as how I got into what I'm doing now. I spent 18 years in property management, asset management, CapEx projects, lots of things that dealt with insurance. But finally that career ended, and so I decided to start my own thing. So here we are.
Yeah, that's
now
awesome.
We're doing churches.
Yeah, well, I know it's been a huge blessing to many of the churches that you have worked with. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast is because many of the churches we work with at Church Biz are facing either skyrocketing insurance rates or some of them even in Texas and Oklahoma getting dropped from by their insurance company. And so you have been really helpful with us at Redeemer Round Rock, looking out and seeing what policies are out there, helping advise what kind of coverages we need. I know you've worked with a couple of Church Biz clients as well. And so I thought it'd be great to have you on just to speak to churches about the current state of insurance and all that's going on in that. So
of course, there's been a big market shift with churches. Insurance is let's be honest, it's the thing that no one really wants to talk about. You need it when you need it. It's critical that it's right when it's there, when that situation comes up, but it's not the forefront, especially in a ministry standpoint. The first thing a pastor thinks about when they're starting a church is not, what am I going to do for insurance? It's how am I going to find people? How am I going to spread the word? How am I going to build the kingdom? And this is a back burner thing. And so the market shift, though, has happened. Specifically, you mentioned it, Texas and Oklahoma. I would also nationally throw in Florida, California as well. Property insurance specifically is the one where a lot of the churches are being non-renewed for it. Just think of Texas. We've got Gulf Coast hurricanes, tornadoes, hailstorms, wildfires are now the new concern that a lot of people are having. And we're in Tornado Alley, especially for Oklahoma, kind of the Midwest. And so that is certainly a big part of what is happening. The other side of it is just from a profitability standpoint, a lot of the groups that had, Church Mutual, Brotherhood, Guide One, those were some of the church packages. They weren't hitting the profitability because of the losses. And so that's why you're starting to see a lot of the churches being non-renewed at no fault of their own. We've helped churches that were non-renewed who hadn't ever had a claim. They just happened to be in an area where there was a wildfire 2 years ago. And so they've been rejected this year. So it's not that it's the church's fault. It's just the market and the companies themselves are shifting.
Yeah, that's tough. We there's several churches we work with that in Church Biz who came to us saying, we're not getting renewed, and just to advocate for you, you were such a resource to them, helping them find policies that work for them and helping them understand, like you just said, the changing state of the market. It's kind of as you're just going along doing your business as a church, you're not thinking about, the wildfires or the tornadoes or the hail damage is going to change our, insurance policy. But sadly, it has, and it's gonna. And if it hasn't yet, I'm guessing if you're in Texas, Oklahoma, especially, and even Florida, as you mentioned, you're gonna see that change pretty quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll notify you early. There's laws and regulations around how early a carrier needs to notify you. The other big thing I would say that the churches that we are helping are experiencing is when you have a packaged program specifically created for a church, and that packaged program goes away, you're now starting to have to piecemeal a lot of different, potentially carriers, a lot of different types of coverage or lines of coverage, where you may have the property with one group and the general liability with a different group. Whereas what a lot of the clients have been used to is, we just went to Church Mutual and they gave us everything. Yeah. And so we're also seeing that a lot, where those packages may not be as inclusive as what Church Mutual or Guide One or Brotherhood had offered at the time. So that's where my job comes in, is to work through all of that so that the pastor can keep pastoring and shepherding the church, and I'm on the back end trying to make sure that everything is taken care of.
Yeah, that's really good. So let's say a church, they find out this fall, they get the notice they're not going to be renewed, and they want to connect with you. Kind of what would that process look like for you to help and work with them?
Yeah, honestly, it's pretty easy. It becomes a conversation. It's kind of like this, like we did with Redeemers as well. You're getting non-renewed roughly 4 months prior. I would say you really need to start this process 2 to 3 months in advance. There's a lot that entails, especially for some of the more complicated churches. A lot of church plants don't own their own property. That's pretty simple. You need a simple premise liability, some general liability, some auto potentially. There's some other things that we can talk about as well. But once you start getting into your own facility with a multi-million-dollar building, 40, 50, 60 volunteers, the church pastoral staff, the admin staff, are there schools? Are there daycare facilities that are running out of that church? Are you opening that church up to the Boy Scouts to meet, the Girl Scouts to meet, to homeless shelters, to food pantries? Once you start really getting into those types of churches, the process takes a lot longer. Just to do a comprehensive market summary and put it all together for the elder board or whoever's making the decision to do so.
Yeah.
So reach out, with plenty of time is to start. We'll have a conversation. Depending on location, we'll visit the church as well. So we've gone out to a number of the churches that are here in the local area specifically. But we've got a group of people that could go out and do that. And then, it's going to be a lot of dialogue back and forth. Hey, how do you do this? Hey, how many kindergartners are in your program? How many volunteers are in your program? What are the hours? So it'll be a lot of details. But once we get through that, then it's off to the races. And I'm going out to the market. They may have some questions, and I got to come back to you, but we'll keep you in the loop. We'll stay transparent. One thing we tell everybody, we show you every option we get back. You can make the decision for yourself. Here's kind of our advice. But yeah, it's kind of like a wedding. Really busy at the beginning, a lull in the middle, and then really busy the last 2 or 3 weeks before the wedding ceremony happens. It's kind of like that. So
that's good. Yeah, and part of that, part of what I benefited in that process too is as we were having conversations about our church's insurance needs, you helped me think through some areas of insurance that I hadn't even thought about. I think I pride myself in being pretty administratively gifted, but you were bringing out some areas that I thought, I've never even considered that. Yeah. You've mentioned that a little bit, but I'd love for you to share, especially maybe with some of our younger churches or church planters, like what are some of those areas of coverage that maybe aren't even on their radar? Because I think most people think we got to cover the building, or we might need rental insurance if we're in someone else's building. But what are some of those other areas that you might even help them think through?
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the easy ones, right? Do I own the building or am I leasing it? So property insurance versus premise liability. General liability being if someone gets hurt at my facility, trips, slips, whatever it may be, if something happens. And then, we have a church van, we got an auto vehicle, so we need auto coverage, right? Those are the big three that everyone kind of equates to also on a personal side. You have your home insurance, you have your auto insurance. But some others that are out there, a mobile church, helped a mobile church that you guys sent over, and they were going between 2 different locations. They had 2 trailers full of all their sound equipment, TVs, all of the little things that make the church happen. And they didn't have what's called inland marine coverage, which is if that trailer gets broken into or stolen and all of that equipment is gone that they've paid for, there's no coverage for that under your general liability or your property policy or even your auto policy. And so when I brought that to his attention, I said, do you keep everything in those trailers? Oh yeah, our entire church is in those trailers. Well, then you should look at inland marine coverage, and let's protect those belongings. Now they're in their own church facility. Now they have property coverage, and it's included in part of that. So inland marine is a big one. Directors and officers is a big one. You're a pastor that is sharing everything in your heart, hopefully, to your congregation. You are caring for those individuals. You are treating them like family. You are hopefully being treated like family back. But when families fight, it's really messy. And not everyone's going to be happy. And so directors and officers coverage, for example, someone may disagree with your financial management. Someone may disagree with a policy that you set. We just went through COVID. This was a big deal during COVID. with policies being set, state guidelines being followed, not being followed, religious, freedom of religion versus we're being concerning citizens of our community. And so a lot of directors and officers claims came out of, claims came out of that time period. And they financial management as well. Are they stewarding resources really well? As soon as a member of the church, whether you're family or not, if they think that the resources are being mismanaged and there's a claim there, well, you want to have legal representation that you aren't having to pay for out of your own pocket. You don't want the church to have to pay for that legal representation because now you've just angered every other member who's been, faithfully tithing, and now it's going towards an attorney's fees and things like that. So directors and officers coverage. Hired and non-owned auto. A lot of churches go, oh, we don't have a van. Well, that's fair. Do you drive kids anywhere? Do you go speak at another church as a part of, for Redeemer Network? Are you hiring a van to take kids to camp? Is a volunteer driving their own vehicle? That's included under hired and non-owned auto. And a lot of people just go, we don't have a vehicle. We don't need auto coverage. Some others that we are talking through actively right now: security teams, volunteer security teams, armed security teams, hired police officers. I learned this just 2 weeks ago that some policies, Church Mutual being one of them, since it's a big program, they actually require your armed officer to show, like a City of Cedar Park or City of Round Rock, to actually have their own liability coverage. Oh, wow. Whether through the department or on that officer on their own, since they are doing that work on their own accord. There's some pretty large topics and lawsuits right now that are in the world of insurance around the armed security teams. Are they church-sanctioned security teams, or are they not church-sanctioned security teams? And where is the line of liability? Obviously, in Texas, that's a big deal. A lot of concealed carriers, handgun carriers in Texas, Other states, maybe not as big of a deal, but still important. Some other things that I was thinking through, third-party liability. Ministry is wonderful. Churches do an incredible job of reaching out into the community. We talked about this a little bit. We want to serve the community in the food pantry. That opens up an element of liability and unfortunately theft and other things around it that need to have coverage for it. And some carriers exclude coverage for that. Some carriers will automatically decline if you have a food pantry. You at the school. We have our music studio. We have a church, not to name any names, that has a bike trail and zero liability on it.
That sounds fun, but also a liability nightmare.
It's a great ministry opportunity, and yet it's a giant gaping hole for them.
Yeah.
And it's on their property, and they would be at risk if someone got, tragically injured. Yeah. So there are definitely a lot of things that when you're thinking through, it's not just property. It's not just premise, it's not just general liability or auto, but there's a lot of other components that can be, in these policies that provide coverage or don't provide coverage.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you're starting to hear that list and your head's starting to spin, like maybe mine was, like, oh my goodness, I haven't thought of these things. One of the great things that you guys do is you help churches think through. That's why even if you can, visiting on site or learning as much as you can. And I've loved that about working with you guys, is that you're such a help in helping get a 360 view of what are all the needs, and then presenting all the options. Yeah. So that's really helpful. If your head is spinning, don't worry. Jacob can help you walk through that process and think through that.
Yeah, and I told that church with the bike trails, my job is not to come and be the guy that says you can't do this. I'm not going to tell you don't do this part of your ministry. I'm going to tell you that your insurance carrier isn't going to give you coverage for that part of your ministry, and you have to assess that risk as a church and as a ministry staff and outreach. But I'm not the guy that says you can't do X, Y, Z. You can do it. Here's what it's going to either cost you to have the coverage, or here's the risk if you don't. And so that's where I try and step in and faithfully walk alongside the elders or the church pastors, depending on who that individual is that we're meeting with.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Because like you said at the beginning, a lot of pastors, especially in smaller churches, they're doing a lot of things, and they really want to just do ministry, preach the word, teach, reach out to people. And for many of these people, this is the farthest thing from their mind. Especially if you don't have that personality type to kind of think through worst case scenarios. Usually it'll be things that people haven't even considered. So really helpful stuff.
Yeah. And no one looks at a church and says, no one's looking around for a church going, the number one thing on my list is, how's their insurance? That's not what members are looking for. The congregation's looking for. So that's where I want to step alongside and have a skill set that isn't as common as serving in kids, singing in the band, doing slides, those sorts of things, a welcome team. Come alongside with a skill that I'm learning and sharpening, and be able to walk alongside churches in that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's cool too how you mentioned your background in facilities management. I'm sure that gives you even a leg up on understanding a lot of these things from the operational perspective, and now being on the the insurance side.
Yeah,
of
absolutely,
things.
absolutely. There's definitely a lot of carryover between the two.
Yeah,
and I tell people all the time, I used to be the guy asking for the contractor's insurance all the time when they were doing big projects for us, and now I'm the guy giving the contractors the insurance.
Yeah.
So I'm just on the reverse side of it.
That's good. Well, if you had maybe one or two tips for pastors, churches, as they're considering liability, considering insurance needs, what would those be?
Number one, probably biggest mistake that I see is that they don't know what's in their policy. Redeemer's policy is 245 pages long. I've reviewed it at length. And you tell me, did you ever read through all 245 pages?
I think I read through 2 to 4 of those pages.
The ones that showed a price and the ones that said who you were. A lot of, and not through their own fault. There's a lot going on. And there's a lot of legal jargon in those things. So they're boring to read, But I would say if I had 2 tips, A, know what is included and what is excluded in your current policy, and ask those questions. Review it with someone. Review it with an independent broker. We're not tied to any particular carrier. I don't sell only Farmers or only Liberty or only State Farm. We can go to the market and go anywhere. So review those and then explore options. Just because you've been in, you started your policy when you were a church plant and didn't have your own facility, and you've renewed with that same carrier for years, and now you're going into a new phase of your church, maybe you're getting a new building or whatever it may be, there might be a better option that can save you money or be the same cost and provide better coverages, but you don't even know about it. And so know what is in your policy and what's excluded from your policy, and then explore your options.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And it's part of what even Church Biz is passionate about, is we want to help lead churches into God-honoring stewardship.
Yeah.
And so I think that what you're saying even is, hey, don't just sit there and renew because you've always had it. Dig into it. Make sure you're stewarding those resources well. The things that God has blessed you with, a building, maybe a bike trail, although that one is off the beaten path. Make sure that those are covered and that it's really a part of good stewardship is making sure that you've crossed all your T's and dotted your I's. So,
and sometimes it's just holding your insurance carrier accountable.
Yeah. You
may be at the best place, but do you know that? Were there other options? Maybe all the other options do come back more expensive or, worse coverage. Good. At least now you know that you're steward, and you can go stand in front of your congregation and say, hey, we had a 15% increase this year, but we shopped it out and everything else was still more expensive.
Yeah.
And now you can stand up there and you can share the stewardship that is happening through that process. Because let's be honest, it is a large portion of financial budgets for churches. Especially if you're owning your own facility, it's a big line, and it needs to be stewarded well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. One question I like to ask, we have different guests on the podcast, is, and you've mentioned some very practical things, but I'd love to hear, how do you see God at work through the work you're doing for churches?
Yeah, I see Him doing a lot of work at myself. That's number one. But specifically, and why I'm passionate about serving the churches, our own church started as a church plant, started in a living room, grew to some different centers. Then we added kids ministries, and we added sorts of things that came into it. Then programs, then our own building. We've Redeemer has seen that escalation. A lot of churches have seen that growth pattern. And the thing that I keep going back to is that mentality of building the kingdom of God. How can I help a church save money as a church plant, putting more goldfish in the kids ministry. I think I've said this to you before, but like, how do I help them put more goldfish on the table than money in the insurance carrier's pocket? When the needs arise, how can I make sure that we are sustaining that church's longevity and their ability to function because they had the appropriate coverage for something that maybe they didn't think about that popped up and didn't financially ruin that church, and being able to sustain the kingdom of God that he is working in through these individuals that are guiding these churches and leading the way. How do we make it sustainable? How do we make it practical? How do we make it economically feasible? I would say those are probably, from an insurance perspective, those are the ways. I think the other side of it that I've really started to enjoy as well is getting to meet other brothers and sisters, learn how God has changed their lives, learn how God is working in their churches. Fascinating story, real quick, is had a church I was working on. They're a mobile church. The church I was talking about with the 2 trailers and had no coverage for it. And we're getting through the process. We're about to sign a deal. And he says, hey, give me a call tomorrow. We'll collect payment. Tomorrow comes around. I give him a call. He goes, I can't pay it today. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I need you to redo our insurance. And we've been working on this for 2 months now. He says, a church came to us yesterday and offered us their building and their bank account to take over and move into their facility.
Oh, wow.
In full. Oh, so now we need a property policy. So let's work through that. But being able to watch the Lord work in a way where a church that had a facility was dying out a little bit. Congregation had gotten older. Leadership had changed. Hadn't really found a stable leader anymore. They were willing to take the resource that God had given them and pass it on along to a church that has 500 members but didn't have a place and are up and coming but couldn't really get settled and needed that kind of extra boost. And to watch the Lord work in that way, I think is going to be really crucial for some of these churches that are in smaller, older towns, aging populations without a lot of people moving back into those communities. And how are they going to use those gifts and continuing the kingdom? So kind of a neat story.
Yeah.
Then we took another month to get his property policy all solidified before they moved in. But yeah, I mean, it's a cool way to watch God work.
Yeah. And what I hear you saying is you guys really work relationally, and you get to be connected to. It's not just a commercial transaction.
Yeah.
It's a relationship, and that's something we value at Church Biz too. We don't just want to be a commodity to churches. We really love the local church, and we want to see it flourish. And I hear that same heart with you as you're sharing that there. So.
Yeah, I mean, and full disclosure for those that are listening, I'm a member of Redeemer Round Rock. I worked on Redeemer Round Rock's policy. I didn't actually sell Redeemer's policy, but we were able to have really good, healthy conversations through our own church and our own teams to hopefully put us in a position to better that. And we shopped it out and we verified Church Mutual was still the best option.
Yeah.
So recommendation, stay there.
Yeah.
I'm not leaving the church.
Yeah.
We're going to come back again next Sunday. So
well, and I asked you, I said, hey, what would you go with? And you gave me the honest answer and said, hey, what Church Mutual is doing is the best option for the next year. Let's reevaluate the next year. So really appreciated that. Yeah. And just to know, if you do reach out to Jacob, he's a man of integrity and honesty, and he's really going to care about your best interest, not his. And in the long run, I think the Lord, blesses that, and that's advancing the kingdom, just like you shared. So
it's been really fun. It's been really life-giving, working with some of the churches and even reconnecting with people that I knew as a kid that happen to be members of Church Biz, and so it's been really fun to serve this way.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I like to, every time we do a podcast, have fun time and talk about some topics, whether that's politics. No, we don't really get into politics, but just more lighthearted stuff. Sure. Let people get to know that side of our guests. And so normally I give the guests a choice, like, hey, here's 3 topics, but I can't give you a choice today because there's something coming up that we have to talk about. The rivalry of University of Texas and Texas A&M is renewed. What, in maybe 2 weeks from now, a week from now?
Yeah, next Saturday. Two Saturdays from today.
Yeah. So first I want to ask you, how do you feel about that big game? I mean, it's been several years since they played, over a decade, I think.
Yeah, 2011.
2011. Yeah,
and I was there.
You were there
for it. And Kyle Tucker, not Kyle Tucker. He's the Astros baseball player. Justin Tucker. I watched him kick that field goal right at
Yeah.
me and through the uprights, and it was just...
Was that at Kyle Field, that one?
It was
Okay.
at Kyle Field. So we're back at Kyle Field,
Okay.
which is great. It's going to be a big game. I mean, hopefully, it's going to determine the SEC championship and playoff implications and all those things. But I am going to pull a Mike Elko and say that we can't go past Auburn this weekend. So we've got to focus. I hope the boys are focused on Auburn. But if we get there, it's going to be a wild.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I think it will be the loudest game that will have ever been played in recent memory. I was there for a couple of them that I remember when we beat number 1, maybe number 2 Nebraska back in the Big 12 days, and then we also beat Oklahoma one year, and I happened to be at the Alabama game that we won a couple years ago, and then they stomped us the next year 77-0. But I think it'll be one of the most raucous, loudest. Let's be honest, the rivalry is coming back, but between fan bases, that rivalry never stopped.
Yeah.
It carried all the way through the last 13 years of SEC football. So.
Yeah. Okay. So that's there's excitement. You're feeling that rivalry renewed. What's your prediction? You got to get on the record. What's your prediction?
Oh, prediction is I felt a lot better before we lost our running back 2 weeks ago. It's a night game at Kyle Field. I was at the LSU game where we went to 7 overtimes, and we weren't supposed to beat them.
That was amazing.
We weren't supposed to beat them, but as a alumni of A&M, I think the 12th man is going to show up. Night game, electric atmosphere, a lot of grudges, and no one wants to lose the first game of the new renewed rivalry. So, of course, I'm going to go with A&M. I think that we've got to get our passing game going. If I'm going to give my very amateur analysis, we've got to get the passing game going. UT's defense is great. If we can establish the run, Marcel's going to run it. We know he's going to run, our quarterback. But if we can get a rhythm and we can get something early, I think keep the crowd in it, and I think it could be A&M. It's going to be close.
Okay.
I hope it's close.
Game.
I hope it's close.
You're picking A&M.
I am picking A&M.
Okay.
We would love nothing more than to ruin UT's chances of going to the college football playoff.
Yeah.
Plus, every UT fan says it. We're not their real rivalry. That's OU.
Yeah.
So we're here. It's our Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We're coming in hot. So.
Well, yeah. As a little brother Texas Tech fan who's now left out of these skirmishes,
Yep.
I'm excited to watch the game, and I'm gonna pick Aggies. I'm gonna go with Aggies. I think the Aggies are gonna win a close one. Maybe I'm gonna say 35-27. I'm gonna give them 8 points.
Okay.
So
I'm all for that.
I'm calling it here. Aggies are gonna do it, and I would love nothing less. Let me look into the camera and say this: to see the Longhorns pushed out of the playoffs by the Aggies. It will be so beautiful. Come on, Aggie Nation.
That's
Whatever
right.
it takes. Let's make that happen.
I love it. I'm in.
That one's special for you, Chris. So, and Randy. We'll throw in Randy Moore. He's a big Longhorn fan.
Right.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, good call, man. Well, Jacob, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This is really helpful information. And you and your family have been such a blessing to our church and to our family. So just thank you for coming on. I know your work of helping church biz clients and other churches that haven't even reached out yet is going to be such a kingdom impact and help so many pastors and finance teams and stewardship teams rest easy at night knowing that they're covered and that they're stewarding things well. So thanks again for coming. That's all we have for today. If you want more info on how to connect with Jacob, I'm going to post your email in the show notes. Is that the best way to get in contact with you? Okay. So, or you can reach out to your client service rep if you're a church biz customer, and we'll connect you with Jacob. Happy early Thanksgiving to everyone, and we hope you have a great week. That's all we have for today.